Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit mainly around the job guarantee, bit of UBI, like you mentioned here and there. I haven't got a whole lot of time, so as in I didn't have a whole lot of time to prepare this, so I stole from Stephen. So yeah, it's a lot, not all of them, but a lot of this is based on what Stephen has been teaching to his students in his Rethinking Capitalism course at Adelaide. So obviously there's a book on the job guarantee, the case for a job guarantee, which I have to admit I haven't read, and it is in the post on the way to me. I ordered it about a month ago and it just hasn't come. But I have read quite a lot of what Pavlina has said and written in other places. Okay, so let's look at, we're talking about job guarantee. We're obviously talking about maybe trying to solve partly this issue of unemployment. We used to have full employment or much lower unemployment, okay, at the level of 1 to 2% all the way through from the Second World War up until the mid-70s, pretty much. We had unemployment sort of, you know, I think an election was almost lost here because unemployment was deemed sort of too high when it just went above 2%. A lot of people, especially, you know, I guess my age and younger, have forgotten. And a lot of economists just don't think it's possible. I think Stephen had a conversation with one and she thought he was lying when he said unemployment, you know, in the 50s and 60s averaged 1 point something percent. No, that can't be. And sure enough, that's what the data shows. It was, and it is possible. And you don't need a job guarantee to do it, because this was achieved without a job guarantee, but you do need sufficient government spending in excess of taxation into the economy to create that. The job guarantee can be part of this exercise. I don't think there are any MMT economists who would advocate that the job guarantee is everything. It's part of the picture. But it is certainly a useful tool. So that's just, I guess, a bit of background and a couple of quotes from this chap. So the faults of the economic society in which we live are its failure to provide full employment, its arbitrary and inequitable distribution of wealth and income. So he thought that was a major fault.
Head fuddled with nonsense for years and years.
Yeah, that's the key one. Yes, exactly. So yeah, there's not some law of nature which prevents people from being employed. You know, people rather than men these days, I guess. And you know, the idea of being financially sound to maintain people in idleness is crazy. But you know, post GFC, what was the solution to the problems in Greece that was recommended by, you know, institutions like the World Bank, the IMF? I don't know who the key organisation was, but austerity. The way out of it is to chuck 20% of your people, you know, never mind 10, 20% people on the unemployment scrap heap. That's how you're going to get out of it. Like, nonsense, absolute nonsense. And, you know, certainly I'm coming at it from the aspect of we need everybody who is able to contribute to our society. And a job guarantee for me is part of that picture. And not only do we need people to contribute, they want to contribute. People on the whole want to contribute. And so obviously, well, not obviously, but you could attribute a lot of that 50s, 60s and half of the 70s period to this chap. He realized what was going on before, and he had a big influence on economic policy for you know, however many years it was, 30 years post-war, and that was broken up, as we know, by other forces. And partly because of the stagflation of the 70s. Underutilisation also has been on the increase. So underutilisation is unemployment plus under employment. Underemployment being where people, have got a job, but they might work 5 hours a week and they want 40. They might work 35 hours a week and they want 40. So it's not, it's not necessarily as bad as unemployment, but it's still a factor that we need to consider. So if we combine those two measures, we can get some kind of underutilisation measure. And there's different measures of underutilisation because we can also think about those who are not attached to the labour force. Now, what happened, for example, in the most recent figures is the unemployment rate came down a tiny bit. But that's because the people in the labour force went down substantially. So people have just given up looking. Now, that'll be a function of lockdowns. But we can see how redundant the unemployment rate is as a tool, as a measure of what's going on in our economy, because when we have these big lockdowns in New South Wales and Victoria between July and August, August showed a reduction in unemployment on July. And it's just, the media still pick it up as the key figure. To be fair to the Bureau of Statistics, they do publish underutilisation numbers. They do talk about underemployment as well, and they do talk about the labour force, but they're not picked up by the media in the way that they should be. There's one, Gareth Hutchins, who's an ABC journalist who does a good analysis on this. So there are some people out there who are promoting the right approach. But, unemployment's increased, underutilisation has increased. And also, we can also think about what kind of jobs that people do have. Are the jobs today the same as they were in the 60s? No, they're not. Generally speaking, they're a lot more insecure, precarious. There's that threat of the sack or, no, sorry, we haven't got any hours for you this week. So it's not just a simple case of employment good, unemployment bad. It is a more complex picture. So in 2019, before the pandemic, there were 680,000 officially unemployed, 1.1 million underemployed, and lots of others who are marginally attached, so not looking for work. Add those up and you get, 10 times the number of vacancies. So there is a huge problem with there not being enough vacancies. And sometimes there might be some localised bottlenecks, and if people can't get people to work in poorly paid industries, a shortage. Well, how about you actually pay people a decent wage? So, as Keynes would say, also the private sector on its own has never been able to provide enough jobs for all those who want a job. So a job guarantee would hire those the private and conventional public sectors have got no room for at that moment in time. But of course, the government can also influence through its fiscal policy how much the private sector hires and influence more directly how much the public sector hires. Not all public sector jobs are job guarantee jobs, of course, even in the job guarantee world. I'm glad somebody's making a living wage off this job. Okay.
The part in the middle is so
the public offering there, yeah.
The part in the middle is so important because some people don't even know that. The private sector on its own has never provided enough job for all those who want a job.
Yeah, and certainly I would argue that conceptually, historically, we are all employees of the government, directly or indirectly. A currency issue in government issues a currency in return for people to pay taxes. So we pose the tax liability as the government because we're saying we want you to work for us. We want you to work for us as a soldier. So it's the government. We all work for the government, I think.
Can't be half pregnant.
So yeah,
All attached.
yeah. So yeah, sure. There's the private sector, and we can conceive of jobs in the public or private sector, but ultimately, the source of those jobs is the government, and a lot of people, I don't think, appreciate that. But at some point, the private sector may be able to provide a reasonable number of jobs when we're in a boom period, or exports are doing particularly well, and obviously the great thing about job guarantee is that it moves up and down with the cycle. Okay.
What do you mean by that? It moves up and down?
More the private sector.
Yeah. So yeah. I think I'll come on to it in a later slide. But if there is very little unemployment because the traditional public sector has been expanded, or the private sector is going gangbusters, or we're exporting lots to China, or whatever reason it is, then the private sector is providing, unemployment's tiny. So yes, there'll be a job guarantee, but very few people want it. So it shrinks. It's an automatic stabilizer. The amount of money that the government spends on the job guarantee shrinks. Then, the exports dry up, or there's another GFC, or oil prices go up, or no, that's not going to be so problematic, hopefully, at this point, because we're not so oil dependent. But there's some kind of shock, okay, and we go into a recessionary environment, and lots of people are thrown onto the dole, but they're not, because they're thrown into the job guarantee scheme. Spending increases, and that will boost the economy generally. So it's an automatic stabilizer in that sense. And we already have automatic stabilizers, of course, through Centrelink payments and what's it called, New Start or something, and through taxation. But this would be an automatic stabilizer on steroids. If we had a job guarantee, it would be it would move a lot with the cycle. Whereas, of course, a UBI would be constant, would not have that same property to it. Yeah. Did you talk about was it a job, right to a job? Your UN statement that came in yours, was that everyone has the right to employment?
The right to work, but the one I chose,
right,
the one I put up, was only about a right to a living.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But there is one about a right to a work as well. So in a sense, it's a human right. There was that. I think in that unemployment chart we talked about, there was a white paper, on unemployment. But in Australia, people have a right to a job. Globally, people have a right to a job. Just ethically, people have a right to one. A job guarantee. Well, there's so many different ways that you could structure it, but it could be flexible. You can make it compulsory. I wouldn't be advocating that. No. You can make it voluntary, of course, no compulsion. You could say no loss of income support for those who choose not to participate. So you could just say, if you don't work, then you will receive X amount, and you can choose to participate in the job guarantee scheme or not. I would probably go for an approach, and I think Stephen would agree, whereby you pay a certain amount as a basic income to those who don't want to work, are able but don't want to work, but you pay a little bit more for those that take up the job guarantee option, which probably most people would anyway. A job guarantee is an effective minimum wage. If you have a job guarantee in place, you don't need a minimum wage anymore. We have a minimum wage in Australia, I don't know, around $20 an hour. I don't know exactly what it is. I know it varies for youngsters, it's a bit less. But what's the minimum wage if you don't have a job? 0, or whatever Centrelink's going to give you, right? So it's not really an effective minimum wage. So the minimum wage is, and I might be stealing from what I'm talking about later, I can't remember, but a minimum wage is porous if you don't have a job guarantee. In two senses, it's kind of porous. It's got holes in it. It misses out those people that are unemployed. But also, we know the kind of tricks that employers pull, even if there is a minimum wage, right? We know what people like on the run do to international students. They're only allowed to work 20 hours a week. So on the paper, they work 20 hours a week, but they actually work 40, and they're getting half the pay. That kind of thing, it happens. If we had a job guarantee, we'd be using the market as a tool, because why would you work for Uber or for On the Run, for peanuts or for wherever, if you could get a job guarantee somewhere, working for the government? You wouldn't do that. The market would discipline that minimum wage, would discipline the employers to pay a decent minimum. So it's a better option than a minimum wage that's legislated. So there was a job guarantee scheme in Argentina in the early mid-2000s. Plan Jefes, I don't know exactly what the Jefes is referring to, but it was a minimum payment. It wasn't a true job guarantee, as we might advocate, because it was for the head of household. I think they originally designed it for men, but then they shifted because there were so many women that wanted to take this up. So it was mainly taken up by women. People worked in community projects and were directed to training programs, so it included some training as well. So it was quite large. And what did people value about this job guarantee that they had? They did value the income to an extent, but what was more important to them was they can do something. It provides a good environment. They're helping the community. They learn. People, and I think if you dig down on some of this, it was also the social connections that people really valued, that they went to a place of work where they could interact with other people, and that gave them a feeling of self-worth. There's all of these psychological benefits of having a job which a UBI wouldn't offer if it didn't increase, it wouldn't directly increase employment. So every female participant, without exception, wanted to work rather than receive a welfare check of equal amount. Yeah, so one option is to say, $35,000, you can either do, I'm just putting a number out there, in Australian terms right now, you could either do a job guarantee job, or you could do nothing, and you will still get this. You'll still get this money. Not universal. If you have a better paid job, then you're not going to receive this. So that would differ from a UBI. But on this basis, I think more people would actually take up the job guarantee option. Yes.
How extensive was the RED scheme in the 70s here?
Sorry, how?
How extensive was the RED scheme in the 70s that had groups of people doing work in the environment? I don't think it was that extensive.
I don't know about that. Sorry,
It was a little bit like this on a tiny basis, but I don't know who kicked it out. Anyone? There's a few people that sold.
Regional economic development.
The loss of the Whitlam government in '75 saw the Liberals cut it.
Yeah.
What was it called? RED?
The RED
The RED scheme.
What does it stand for? Regional something? Or?
Remember
Employment development or something.
Okay.
Yeah. How big was it?
it was most unpopular because they gave everyone menial chores, like putting up wheat and that.
Well, that would be what a job guarantee would do, though.
No, you've got to be...
Well, a job guarantee could do,
Environmental work.
It could be part of it.
That does raise an important point, which is that I think job guarantee is a great idea, but I'm a little bit worried about whether it has the flexibility to match people's training, skills, education and talents to the work that is available. How much flexibility is there?
Well, several ways to answer that. I guess training could be part of it, but the government can decide what's important. Like if we want to tackle, yes. To me, a job guarantee would not be directly part of a Green New Deal or tackling climate change, because it's so important that should be done separately via other, mainly public sector jobs. It would have to have a lot of flexibility built in. It would have to have training built into it, but not training with no job, training and a job.
If government's going to make a decision, then part of that should be based on people's needs, not just the needs of the economy, but people's needs as their fulfilment, self-fulfillment, and their welfare. So.
I don't. I wouldn't envisage a scheme where you've got one option to pick up weeds, or to be a construction worker, or they might be. The more options, the best. Certainly, as Bill Mitchell conceives a job guarantee, it's extremely flexible. I mean, he talks about people, people being able to teach others to surf. So a surfer, might be able to teach the kids to surf, for example, or like. Yeah, so it's there is an argument. I think I might come to it. I can't remember whether I come to it later or not. To say the UBI is more flexible in that it's an amount, and you can do whatever you want with that. I mean, who's the government or the market to tell you what you should or shouldn't do, right?
Yeah, right. I'm just a bit worried there are people in Japan who do MAs and PhDs driving taxis. That seems to me a misallocation of human resources and skills and talents. So anyway.
Yeah, and those questions need to be addressed. I mean, what do we need? What proportion of people go to university? What proportion of people? I mean, there are certainly, as David Graeber wrote the book on bullshit jobs. Are there some bullshit degrees out there? Which are we training people for jobs that aren't required or aren't out there? Possibly.
It starts at schools. The parents and teachers demand that they go to university. As far as I'm concerned, and having been a teacher, the universities for 10% of the students, the rest need to do something else, because the university is basically an academic degree. And what they've done with the tech schools, and what they've done with the TAFE, so on, and even teachers' colleges instead of university, has been a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is, this is kind of like moving away from the key topic. But yeah, I mean, look, I'm of that opinion too, that maybe everyone should be able to go to university if they hit a particular academic entry requirement, then it should be free. Or even, as I went in the 90s in the UK, I got a grant, to go. So I was paid for my beer. To drink, but you have to hit maybe a certain minimum. So I'm not sure that everybody going to university, but certainly training, yes, training, and as part of a job guarantee as well. But instead of just going to some useless private sector, leech who we've got at the moment, that kind of network of, private sector organisations that charge the government a fortune, and there's no jobs at the end of it.
That's right.
There would be a job. But I'm not saying that training's bad.
No.
Not at all.
It's essential.
Just taking on from what was said over here about, the different skills and abilities and all these other sorts of things that people have and the meaningful work. I would also add that there are people who have some degree of disability, but they can still work to some degree.
Yes.
But here's the big but. Often those people who can work, even though they have a degree of disability, find it very difficult in the regular, private sector. And the reason for that is simply because the skills that the people have, and particularly the combination of those skills and the strengths of those skills, are often not wanted. Or if they are wanted, they're split up and they're not done in a way. And also there isn't an environment where those people can really flourish,
Yeah.
And so I think I hope that job guarantee would have something like that.
Yeah. I mean,
I believe with all my heart that if the radical changes in the workplace, and if people could go to work knowing that they were in a positive environment, that they could do the things that they truly love doing, man, they'd be racing for jobs.
Could we leave these long discussions to the end of the presentation, please?
You understand my point?
Yes, I completely agree. Yeah. Okay, so there are plenty of things which need doing given the funding. Okay, if the government's going to come up with the money, there's so much that we can do. And there's some things listed here. Repair, gardens, recycling, infrastructure, little projects, helping the elderly, even if it's just, so there's a lot of people who are, in places like nursing homes who you don't necessarily need a trained nurse, although they need those too, but they might just need somebody to talk to. There's these kind of jobs. We have to be careful with the job guarantee. It does move up and down. So if we think something is so important that people should do it, that something that's so important, then it needs to be done all the time. So That's why the job guarantee isn't a primary means to a Green New Deal. People often put those two together, but you've got to be careful with that, because if we're in a boom time, then the job guarantee is going to shrink down, and we still need to take care of the environment. But I think there are lots of, teachers could always do with additional helpers in schools, for example, and that could move up and down. Little projects, maybe around schools, around hospitals, to build a garden, little mini construction projects that you could do that make the place look nice for the next 10 years. So, okay, we're in a job guarantee phase where there's more job guarantee jobs because we're in a recession. Well, then we build more local stuff, and that lasts for 10 years. And sure, now after a few years, the economy picks up again, those things will still last through. So, little design like that would be good. When I hear about robots, I just kind of roll my eyes. Robots are going to replace. They've been going to replace our jobs ever since the Luddites and before, haven't they? It's not happened. Sure, there'll be a change in the structure of the workforce. There's always stuff to do. In a way, there's too much to do. This rat race, we always want more. Like thinking about like Jason Hickel, like less is more. We need to know when to stop. But having said that, we all want to contribute to society, and we all should have some level of equal access, not complete equality. And because we're living in a monetary production economy, everyone needs to get hold of the money somehow. And if you're doing it via a job guarantee, you're increasing demand by giving them the dollars, but you're increasing supply as well. So in that sense, a job guarantee, is less inflationary potentially than a UBI, although I think I'll come on to inflation a little bit. Don't call me unproductive. What is productivity? What do we mean by productive? Is a private sector job working for, Commonwealth Bank productive? I'm not sure. And I used to work for Commonwealth Bank. So unemployment's not generally the fault of the unemployed. It's a game of musical chairs, as we know. We don't have enough chairs, and we've got too many people, and then people are stigmatised when they can't find a job, a chair. If we're comparing job guarantee jobs to unemployment, there's a low productivity hurdle to get over there. If you're thinking about people being unemployed versus
low productivity hurdle.
Yeah, I guess what that means is if we're comparing somebody who's unemployed, and there is a question mark that we could explore there, but if the alternative is being unemployed, then as long as there is some kind of productivity in a job guarantee job, even if it's not ideal, then it'll be more productive than. The assumption is here that the unemployed person's sitting on the sofa, which isn't necessarily fair. So I take that on board. You might say people are more productive doing what they want to do, like painting. Maybe. I mean, if this is my painting skill, right? If this pen is dead, isn't it? But that's all right. You can see. That's as much as I can do. That's fine. That's fine. You can see it's enough, right? So, should I be able to say, I'm an artist, I deserve a UBI? Now, no one's going to buy my paintings because they're crap, right? No one's going to buy them. Sorry?
Wait till you're dead.
yeah. But I don't think, even then, anyone's going to buy them for me. Okay. But, do I have the right to say, I want to be an artist? That's what makes me happy. Perhaps I do. I think most people recognise that I'm a bad painter. I don't want to do that. I think most people.
You can learn it with training.
Yeah. I need a lot of training. I'll go in the job guarantee for artist training. Yeah. I think most people, they do want to contribute, and they want to contribute in something in a more conventional sense. Not everybody, but most people do. Job guarantee jobs don't need to yield a profit. It's not about profit. It's about meeting social needs. Job guarantee jobs contribute to the welfare of course, participants psychologically and non-participants. It's not about work for the dole. I mean, people do dismiss, left-wing critics of the job guarantee scheme often will say, well, you're just a right-winger in disguise, and it's just work for the dole in disguise. And of course, there are some similarities between the two. But if you're backing it up with a well-paid basic income, you're saying you don't have to take the job, and we're also not saying, okay, you don't have to take it, but if you don't, you're going to starve. We're saying no, if you don't, you still get a reasonable income. So it doesn't need to be a job guarantee versus UBI battle. And above poverty level job guarantee doesn't need to be inflationary and can be combined with a basic income. Truly inflationary, the academic definition of inflation is a continuous increase in the price level, not just a one-off jump. So, technically that jump from 100 this year to 105 next year isn't actually inflation unless it's sustained. And there's not a clear definition on how long does it have to go on for before it's continuous. But around inflation, we can just think, is it bad? I mean, inflation means that one person is losing because they're paying more and someone else is gaining. So this idea that we talk about an inflation, some people talk about an inflation tax, it's like a tax, and it's not, because someone else is winning if they're putting up. And who needs to have inflation right now? Low-paid workers. I want inflation for low-paid workers. I want their wage to go up, absolutely. Will that result in short-term increases in CPI? Yes, it will.
That's what the Reserve Bank wants.
So, well, yeah. They might not want it for low-paid workers, but yeah. I mean, they do. Yeah. So, yeah. A job guarantee would cause inflation. There are other ways of tackling inflation. I don't think it will be as inflationary as a UBI because you've got that supply increase along with the demand increase. And with a UBI, just the sheer quantity of it, if it's good to a real income for people, so at least say 30 grand, maybe 40 grand, it would, for everybody in Australia, it would double the size of the government budget. And of course, we've got the dollars. We know that the government can never run out of dollars, right? But it would be potentially very inflationary. A job guarantee as part of full employment will benefit everybody, or all the workers anyway, because it boosts their bargaining power. If you don't have the threat of being thrown on the scrap heap, I read people. I read stuff where people are writing about how can we improve the bargaining power for workers, and they're thinking about legislative changes to boost the power of trade unions. And I'm going, nah, that stuff might help around the edges. The key thing is full employment. Then the workers will have bargaining power, because you can't afford to kick me out because you haven't got anyone else to come in. So in that sense, again, could it be inflationary in that it might spark a wage price spiral because you've then given workers back that bargaining power? Yes, that is a risk, and it's a risk worth taking, in my opinion.
You've got bargaining power. You don't want stagnant wages forever, do you?
No. You need that bargaining power.
That's the problem we've got, though.
Yeah, exactly. And capital have just taken more and more of that share. We can look at inequality measures increase. If we looked at that graph of unemployment going up since the 70s to today, that's fairly well mirrored by the increase in inequality from the 70s to today. The average CEO used to get paid 20 times what the average worker was paid. Now it's like 300 times or something like that. It's just sickening, and it's got to stop, in my opinion. This is the automatic stabilizer part. Okay, it shrinks when we have a boom. It grows in a downturn. It goes exactly where it's needed. So if we have, a car manufacturing plant in Salisbury that closes down, the job guarantee would go right there, because all those people are unemployed and they need support. It would automatically support them. So it's targeted to where it's needed, rather than being scattergun UBI, everyone gets it. In a sense, Pavlina talks about how unemployment is like an epidemic. It kind of infects one person and then infects another. It infects communities. We know about, families who have got no hope. The kids have got no role models. The only way out is sport or drugs or something like that. In some of these areas, You know, you can talk about the US, the Rust Belt. You can talk about the UK, where I'm from. Are you from Liverpool or not? Yeah. So I'm from Formby. So I'm not exactly salt of the earth. But you know, like, for a lot of people in the heart of Liverpool in the 80s when I was growing up, you know, the only way out might have been to be a good footballer, or to do something illegal. So it would ensure that those geographical areas don't suffer those kind of fates. It replaces a buffer stock of unemployed people with a buffer stock of employed people. This is from Bill Mitchell. So Phillips curve is the trade-off between unemployment and inflation, which has sometimes held at different points, you know, in time, and other times haven't. But if you think there is that trade-off, then this eliminates the trade-off, if you think there's that trade-off. Because instead of, if you want to have lower inflation, you have to do it with more unemployment. Well, now you can do it with more job guarantee jobs. I mean, not that you would intentionally, generally, do that, but if you feel that links, I'm not going to play, this is a clip of Bill Mitchell explaining that, but I'm not going to play that now because we're running out of time, aren't we? It provides a fixed wage that anchors the labour market. So the idea is actually that it would be an inflationary anchor because it's a fixed amount that wouldn't change or wouldn't change very often. However, for me, I do have a bit of a question mark on this personally as to whether, and here I might deviate from what Stephen would say, as to whether the job guarantee can perform as an inflationary anchor and be a decent minimum wage. If there is inflation elsewhere in the economy and the job guarantee wage stays the same, it will become eroded over time. So I think it's going to have to move up. And so it's not the perfect counter-inflationary tool that some MMT proponents say that it is. And I'm MMT broadly, but I've got that question mark. And someone might be able to answer it for me, but I've got that little query at the moment. It's far better than what we currently have, you know, as an idea. Improves working bargaining power. I've talked about that already. You know, the delivery riders are going to move away. It would destroy Uber's business model, in my opinion. It would destroy it. We'd have to go and collect our own takeaways again. I mean, that's not so bad, is it? You know, no. Like, that's what we used to do. Or we'll pay the restaurant a bit higher sum to deliver it to us. So what? Yeah, it's all about what's a fair and equitable distribution of resources in society, and it's not reasonable that I live in the eastern suburbs. I don't want to pay somebody $2 to deliver to me. That's not fair for them. So I always try and collect my own takeaways, just as a matter of. But anyway, but sometimes my other half doesn't agree with me. But of course, it's not. You know, to me, it should be a government decision that's made. And we're using the market, right? We're not saying Uber Eats is illegal. We're using the market, right? And I think we'll be using it in the right way. I did write a little a year or so ago a little article on Uber Eats and the job guarantee in the what's it called? I'll remember it later. What am I saying here? It could be seen as having an inflationary impact, and it would be a change in relative prices. But it's a change. It's a change in prices that is needed. We did have stronger working bargaining power in the 50s and 60s. We did have control of inflation. It is possible to control inflation and have full employment at the same time. Obviously, the oil price rises was the main thing that was going on in the 70s that disrupted that better time. Just one way to construct it. Again, this is like Bill Mitchell's stuff at the University of Newcastle. So where you've got Commonwealth Employment Service offices, and sitting under them you've got local job guarantee offices. So federally funded because they've got the dollars, locally administered, responding to local needs, responding maybe, like you say, to the needs of people. What jobs do they want to do? What jobs are they able to do? What jobs do councils want doing? There's so much work to do around closing the gap for Indigenous people. It's just a slogan that hasn't happened, right? Job guarantee might be one way. Again, you could argue it's so important that there's also more permanent resources put into that, but it could also...
And the details are important.
Yeah. This is just one. I'm not on top of exactly the details, and there are definitely different people that propose different things. Who decides what has got value? Critics might argue that it only allows the market or the government to determine what have value. It does have maybe less freedom than a UBI would have. But I'm saying, I've said this point already, we all work for the government directly or indirectly. If we think about how our economy works with our currency, I don't think it's a feasible method of social provisioning to say anybody can do anything. So I don't think it's feasible. So I think it's always going to be a value judgment. And we can have a broad job guarantee that does include the surfing lessons, and we can have a generous basic income guarantee. That's what that is. But we ultimately can't escape those value judgments about what you want to do or not. So unfortunately for me, I'm not going to get paid a large sum to paint stickmen. It's just not going to happen. I'm going to have to take training and become better to sell a few. Yeah. It's not a panacea, okay? It's not going to tackle all our problems. It's not the primary means to get to full employment. That is sufficient government spending. This just mops up the excess. It's not enough to tackle the Green New Deal, the climate crisis. It's not enough to tackle everything, but to me, I think it's the single most important policy that we could have. Okay, so a UBI would address some of the same issues. Genuine UBI would be universal and would be enough, be enough to live on, and would go to everybody. It doesn't address the non-financial costs of unemployment. It would not be counter-cyclical. You'd have to basically give with one hand and take away with another if you didn't want it to be inflationary. The sheer scale of the stimulus, because it would be doubling government spending, approximately, and it doesn't directly increase supply. So I think a job guarantee is the single most effective policy to tackle inequality, and not the only one, but the single most effective one. And a basic income guarantee backing it up would be a good idea, I think. Yeah, look, we know what's happening now doesn't work. Okay, these are the employment providers that just don't really do their job properly because there aren't enough jobs. Sure, somebody might get a job, but overall, it's just not going to work. The only people that win are the service providers. This is even a Council of Small Business Organisations CEO, shallow intellects who have failed due to lazy pomposity. Okay, so traditional economics has failed us. We need an alternative, and in my opinion, that alternative would include a job guarantee. So yeah, that's the end of that presentation.